Oh, there's Sheldon coming in. Happy is here. Okay. Happy Saturday. Happy Saturday.
Happy Saturday. Hey, Karim. Hey, everyone.
How you doing? All right. Thank you for coming. Morning, Sheldon.
Morning, Brother Graham.
All right. All right.
Okay, so I started recording, so I guess, let me see here. If everyone can mute their mic right now, we can start. Good afternoon. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Amadou Diallo Foundation Forum. The title today is DA and Immunity. Our board members are here. Mohamed Diallo, dialing in from Atlanta. Graham Weatherspoon, dialing in from New York City. And myself from Maryland. And I welcome our guest speakers, Professor Kevin Boyle from the AU, University of American University, and Attorney Casilda Roper from New York, upstate, right?
No, New York, Brooklyn.
Brooklyn, oh, hey, Brooklyn, great. And Attorney Stephen Drummond also. We have this distinguished guest that joined us, Ron Wise from Skadden, Jane Adam from the BCC, and our very, very nice audience, friends, and supporters are here. So welcome again to the ADF Forum. Our foundation mission is to advocate for racial equity and promote education for students of African descent. I'm going to yield back to our moderator and our board member, Graham Weatherspoon. Graham.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Diallo. Thank you very much. Thank you all for attending. This is our second installment during this COVID pandemic, where we're looking at the issue of the grand jury. We had an installment on October 12th, which was Columbus Day. And the attorneys who are here with us today graced us with a plethora of information, but I want to give you some background information on these three individuals. Casilda Roper-Simpson, born in Panama, a great place. I've been there. My wife's family is from Panama, so rah, rah, rah. And Casilda is a graduate of Brooklyn Law School in 1994. And she's worked in human rights. She's done criminal law. She's worked for the district attorney's offices. And she was also one of the initial attorneys to represent Abner Louima in that most infamous case regarding the sodomization of this Haitian man by members of NYPD. She's also an adjunct professor at Malloy College. She's working with numerous community organizations in Brooklyn and in Long Island, the NAACP. She's on the civil rights wing of the Black Bar Association. Casilda Roper-Simpson.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. The two subsequent gentlemen have interlocking history. Attorney Stephen Drummond, who is the co-partner of Drummond and Scalacci in Queens, has served in the United States Marine Corps and in the United States Army. He's an adjunct, not an adjunct, excuse me, he's a JAG officer with the U.S. Army Reserve. I believe his rank is Lieutenant Colonel, but he is a practicing attorney in civil rights, criminal, and civil law. I've seen him in action in the court, very well versed in his craft. He's a graduate of Miami Law School. And thirdly, we have Kevin Boyle, who is coming to us from the American University in Washington, D.C. Kevin has served 26 years with the United States Army. He's a colonel, and he was also with the JAG Corps. And that's a Judge Advocate General's office, which handles all legal matters within the military. Officers and enlisted men who have committed crimes, some of which could be capital crimes, but both of these gentlemen have moved through that arena. And we thank you for being here. Kevin is also a native New Yorker, born in Queens, raised on Long Island, but he's a good guy. He's down in Washington. So we want to thank both of you JAG officers for being here with us, because law is very expansive. There are so many different types of law to be practiced, and the military courts operate different to our state courts. So now into the grand jury. I want to ask a question. What is the job of the district attorney in a given county or jurisdiction? Any one of you which would like to, Casilda, I ask you first, what is the job of the district attorney?
The job of the district attorney in any county is to be able to find an individual and make a determination of what the charges that they're accused of is actually in fact satisfy the penal code. And especially in terms of the grand jury, it's to bring an indictment. And we've always heard the terminology, you can indict a ham sandwich, but it's imperative in the grand jury to make sure that the grand jurors are very knowledgeable about the laws, the charges that are going to be put against the individual, and to seek that indictment. One of the things that we find in the grand jury is that as individuals, prosecutors, some of them get a bit overzealous and may at sometimes do more than they need to, or not put in evidence that should be in the grand jury. I think that was pretty clear in terms of the Breonna Taylor case, where there were a lot of issues surrounding that case as to what was said, what wasn't said. And there's some reforms that we've discussed on the other town hall that we had, that folks are looking for reform, looking for transparency. And in the grand jury, the DAs, the district attorney is really the only one that presents. The defense attorney is not able to present. In all the years of my practice, I've never been in the grand jury other than to maybe stand outside the door as a criminal defense attorney. And if my client had a question or needed something or wanted something to be clarified, he would come out, but I could not address the grand jurors. So the job is really to, at the end of the day, for all of us that's in this criminal justice system, to seek justice.
Okay. Would we say that the district attorney is the advocate for the victim, Stephen, in criminal matters?
Well, let me try to answer the first question. And thanks for having us. And I appreciate being a part of this forum again. Casilda is absolutely right. The role, in my opinion, of the district attorney is to pursue justice, and how that's defined to the betterment of the county or to society in general. So going to your second question now, it's twofold. You're an advocate in some respects on behalf of the alleged victim, but you're also the bigger advocate to justice, to make sure that justice is served. So I'll give you just by way of two examples. One is where you have someone who the elements of the crime's there. So the district attorney arrests someone, police officer arrests someone who has all the elements of the crime there. Well, theoretically, the district attorney could take a case like that and advance it and prove the guilt beyond a reasonable doubt and find a person guilty and sentence and move on. But the district attorney's role just doesn't end there. It involves a certain degree of evaluation to see what's in the best interest of justice in light of the situation. And then you take, conversely, a situation where you believe in your gut that the person committed the act, or there's enough evidence to lead you to think that the person committed the act. But you also realize that you won't be able to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. Your role, again, in a situation like that is obviously to say, listen, I think this person might have done it, but there's not enough here to prove it. So my obligation in the interest of society is not to charge or seek the prosecution of such a person. So in many ways, it's an advocate, but that role of being an advocate must be balanced with what's in the best interest of the county or the society, the greater society within which a district attorney serves.
Thank you. I got a lot out of that because I was going somewhere, and you really got ahead of me, but it's good because you're on point. Kevin.
I want to echo the two earlier speakers and justice. I mean, and that is the job of the district attorney, is justice. And your question about, is the district attorney, do they work for the victim? And when I was leaving the military, and Stephen can tailor me on this, there is now 3 lawyers in a military case. When there's a sexual assault case, you have the prosecutor, you have the defense attorney, and then the victim's lawyer. So now the military is the first that's done this, is now the victim has his or her own attorney, and that attorney represents the victim's rights, as far as scheduling the case, as far as trying to keep certain evidence out of the case. So it's very unique. So that's a system where you actually have 3 lawyers. But getting back to the original point, justice. Yes, we have an adversarial system, but prosecutors shouldn't keep a record. Like, I don't like prosecutors say, my record is 43-0. Well, is that justice?
Right.
You know, acquittals are actually good for the system because they show people that the system actually works. You know, if we had a conviction rate of 100%, people wouldn't have faith in the system. So a prosecutor has a lot of power, and they have to use that power wisely. Prosecutors get to choose what to charge you with, and that could have influences on your sentence down the line. Is this a mandatory minimum case? Or is this a third strike? So the prosecutor, right at the beginning, gets to choose what to charge. Then when you go to your initial appearance, bail, they're the ones who argue for the bail. And then if somebody can't afford bail, they may wind up in Rikers Island for a year waiting for a trial. Prosecutors also have a lot of power when it comes to the deal. You know, if in the plea bargaining, the prosecutor is the one who's going to say, we'll offer you this, you know, and they kind of have the final say. So the prosecutors wield a lot of power, and they have to use that power wisely when they're seeking justice for their whatever community that they're working for.
Graham, I think as it relates, Graham, to being an advocate for the victim, one of the things in any state, county you go into, it's always the people of the state of X. And the prosecutors representing the state and us as a society to make sure that the crime that the individual committed doesn't come back to society and its people. So when they're charging and they're looking and they're doing all of those variables and thinking and making, they have to do that balance, as has been said earlier. And the balance is not necessarily always the victim, but even in the sense that the defense also, and making sure that that balance exists, because that defendant may need rehab as opposed to incarceration, or may need mental health issues addressed. So it's really the people of the state that they're representing, because never at any time in criminal court do we see an individual plaintiff's names.
Right.
And they're always referred to as the complainant.
Right.
The victims.
Okay. Thank you. As a detective, I've encountered some of that. And we even worked on cases where we proved the defendant to be innocent because although he was charged by the plaintiff, we did not believe what was being told to us. And we were able to exonerate people even before it got to the grand jury. But that's, I want to thank you for those comments. Current issue. We all know about the Breonna Taylor case. And well, we don't know everything, but we've heard about it. And the Attorney General, let me back up. All of us are accountable in one way or the other to somebody else. to whom is the district attorney accountable to, other than the people? Who oversees? Is it the attorney general of the state that oversees the district attorneys? Who oversees the district attorneys in a given state?
Well, look, it depends on in what context you're asking. There's an appellate process. So any case where there's a conviction, the appellate court gets to oversee, in many respects, how the case was prosecuted, should the defendant seek to have an appeal. If you're talking about just a monitoring standpoint, there are laws, the laws that are applicable to me and you are applicable to the district attorney in and of itself. With respect to the laws pertaining to, are they immune from discretionary decisions? They are. And I believe it's a good practice in any civilized society for those people who are in law enforcement to enjoy some level of immunity when it comes to making discretionary decisions. I just don't think going to work in terms of making discretionary decisions to be held criminally accountable for discretionary decisions might have a chilling effect on qualified people pursuing those kind of roles.
In terms of who do they answer to, under the judicial process, when the judge sees a DA or any attorney, because we're held to a high standard. So even attorneys can report a district attorney for what could be bad acts or misconduct. And yes, the immunity exists, but it's to what extent that exists for an immunity really is so they don't get sued and they have the ability to prosecute and handle cases. And even if a witness gives false testimony, for instance, it's not on the burden of the DA. But yes, you have a judge, and if a judge believes that misconduct occurs, then he or she will report the district attorney to the grievance. But all of us as attorneys, we must have the ability to report someone when we see that what they're doing is misconduct, just in general. But at the end of the day, the DA represents the people. And at the end of the day, whether it's a district attorney that was actually voted or all of the ADAs that work under the district attorney, they're all responsible with making sure that they uphold the Constitution.
Okay, I want to jump back to the Breonna Taylor case.
Graham, may I have a minute? I want to recognize a mother of a victim that joined us. Her name is Valerie Bell, the mother of Sean Bell.
Oh, yes.
And I want to recognize her. And also our board members has joined us also, Laura Brown and Sandrine DeCamby. So yes, I gave you back the mic.
Okay, thank you, not a problem. Good morning, Val. Glad to have you here with us.
Good morning, thank you. I'm just here to listen and be educated more. Thank you.
Thank you. How's Bud doing? How's your husband?
He's good. Thank you for asking. We're doing well.
Very
All right.
good.
God bless.
God bless. Thank you. Yes, I haven't talked with Valerie in a good while.
Graham, can I just, sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, just piggybacking off the two earlier ones, the DA is accountable at a lot of levels. One is your license to practice law. Could be suspended or taken from you for misconduct. There's also, you could be voted out of office if you are the district attorney for that particular county or city. You could be voted out of office. And then, like Stephen said, the appellate courts can overturn your decisions. So there are a lot of levels of accountability. And both of our speakers also touched on immunity, which is a very confusing topic, which is in the media a lot. Because immunity, like Casilda just said, is for protect you from being potentially sued, but it's not for criminal liability. So I just wanted to piggyback off what they said. A prosecutor is, held responsible at different levels, and different things can happen to a prosecutor.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have a question from one of our viewers, Angelica Jordan. She says, qualified immunity detrimentally impacts how police accountability applies. Additionally, when cases are settled, the city taxpayers rather than the individual or the departmental law enforcement agency pays the price. Currently, legislative policies to address the police misconduct have stalled in the Senate level. Can the panelists describe their individualistic approaches to addressing police accountability at the local and state level? And what recommendations would you propose federally to have these legal gaps addressed? Qualified immunity for police officers.
Well, can I just start talking about what qualified immunity is and what it isn't?
Okay.
Because in the papers a lot. So qualified, it goes back, and I don't want to do a big history lesson. It goes back to a thing called sovereign immunity from our common law. Basically, you can't sue the king unless the king says you can. Qualified immunity, which means it's a civil liability, not criminal liability. A lot of people mix up the two. So qualified immunity, and it's not just police officers, it's any government official. You can file a suit against a government official, and then they will raise the defense of qualified immunity. And they're going to say, well, I was within the scope of my job. So you can, if there's an incident, and it's not just police officers, any government official for some discretionary act, you can sue the individual and also the city, all right? So the city could still be liable, but the individual will raise the defense of qualified immunity. I was doing my job. And then there'll be determination of whether qualified immunity is valid in this case or not. So there'll be a hearing, and if the judge says, no, qualified immunity doesn't pertain to this case, then you go forward with the trial. If the judge says, yes, qualified immunity does pertain, you can appeal that decision up to the highest levels. One of the problems with qualified immunity is when does it apply? And it's a little bit vague, especially with police officers. When does it apply? Because it says somebody can raise this defense, and defense could be upheld as long as the person didn't violate somebody's constitutional rights or prior case law. All right, so that's at the Supreme Court level, and that's the Supreme Court's decision. So qualified immunity, you got to know what it is to fix it. But you have to understand it's not just police officers, and you have a lot of times where, because a lot of people say it should be abolished, totally. And you think about, you were, maybe Graham, you're on Hillside Avenue back in the 70s or 80s, and I'm thinking of, there's the car dealership, the laundromat. So you're on Hillside Avenue, and you want to chase a suspect. And you've got to make a split-second decision to chase the suspect. You don't want to be afraid that you might get sued if you run into somebody, on a bicycle or something. So that's kind of the theory of qualified immunity. And I'll let the other two, join in, and then we can talk about how to fix it. But you have to understand what it is first. So if you're making that decision, should I chase this person on Hillside Avenue? You don't want to say, well, I don't want to get sued, right? In case I knock somebody over. So that's, and it applies to any government official, not just police officers.
So first of all, it's an excellent question. So I would try to take a stab at it in a number of ways. I start off from the fundamental principle that in any civilized society, you need law enforcement, you need governmental official. I think across the board, everybody will agree with that. So now then comes the second tier. How can we ensure that those that are in charge of policing us or governing us abide by constitutional principles? What's right, what's fair? The concept of qualified immunity works. You need it to some degree because I don't believe qualified people are going to seek a job in any facet in society when they think for discretionary decisions, they're going to be personally held liable. So how I try to explain qualified immunity is it works to the extent of, if you think of frolic and detour. So the easy way of explaining that is like, if you take the UPS driver, he or she is given a particular route. This is your route to go and deliver stuff. So he or she then decides, okay, you know what, while I'm on my route, I'm going to stop and hang out with my girlfriend or my boyfriend and take a different route to do so. The company didn't employ them for doing that. They employed them to go directly to a particular route. So the company then will argue, this was a detour from the job that we wanted to do, which we have the concept of frolic and detour. Police officers going to the qualified immunity. So I use that as an example to give you a basis to how qualified immunity works. Police officers are entitled to qualified immunity if they are acting within the scope of their employment. Some discretionary decisions now, as the example Kevin used, a suspect is on the run, they grab a bicycle, they hit someone while they're on a bicycle. You wouldn't want to take that job where, you know, if I'm chasing a dangerous suspect and I, in that process, hit someone on a bicycle, that decision puts me personally liable. I don't believe responsible people would take the job. Now, if you take a situation where the police officer is acting entirely out of the scope of the job. So my law partner is on the line. We had a case, and not to tell too much war story, but I think it addresses the point. It's public news, so I'm not revealing anything privileged. We had a case of Erica Noonan, big case. We have a $2.1 million judgment as we speak against a New York City police officer based on allegations of rape. And he arrested her for drunk driving. Next thing you know, they're up in the Bronx. He arrested her for drunk driving. She wakes up the next morning. He sought to date her a number of times and wake up one night after a date, unknown to her, out in Long Island. They did a test to determine whether or not she sexual intercourse happened the night before. And to some degree, the test came back establishing that that happened, while based upon our position, she was asleep. So we sued the police officer in his individual capacity, and we also sued the city of New York. New York says, wait a second, we hired this guy to be a police officer. We didn't hire him to date women and take them out at night. And next thing you know, they wake up in another county unbeknownst to them. So they get out. The city of New York got out of that case because he was detouring from that which he is hired to do. Now you hold him individually responsible. So he doesn't get away. But the problem here now is the deep pocket is gone.
Right.
So you end up getting a $2.1 million judgment for someone, and you potentially may not collect that money by virtue of qualified immunity acting outside of the scope of the person's employment. But I still stand by the principle that it is important to make a distinction, because when you do sue the city, it comes out of taxpayers' pocket. So we are the ones that's paying for it ultimately. Mm-hmm. But you cannot hold police officers or government officials to some degree for discretionary decisions, because the chilling effect, in my humble opinion, is going to be far reaching. I wouldn't apply for the job. I don't think Grime looking at it saying, look, for discretionary decision, my house is on the line, everything on. I just don't think responsible, qualified people will take the job if it extends where you could be personally held liable for discretionary decision.
Thank you, Stephen.
In terms of the police officers in qualified immunity, they can lose that, as has been stated by both of our speakers so far, if they clearly established statutory or constitutional rights are violated. And all.
You want to start your car?
Pardon me? Oh. All officers of the court, we take we plea and we take an oath to uphold the Constitution. So those are some of the things that they can lose their immunity for. But also keep in mind that when we have officers, when they get to that level, it really should be from way before, in terms of really educating the community, in terms of making sure the educated community is very aware of how police officers, commissioners, all the variables, and put people in place to make sure that the officers of certain caliber can and will exist. And when they don't do what they're supposed to do, then they're no longer employed. Unfortunately, with Mr. Floyd's death, that county moved efficiently and very quickly and diligently and terminated those officers, because what they did was outside of the Constitution and had some elements of clearly established statutory issues that they violated.
Right. It's difficult to be a police officer and a criminal at the same time. I'm looking at the George Floyd case. People ask me, well, what would you do if you were there? I said, it's a rough one, but I would have had to have intervened. You're witnessing a crime. And as a police officer, your job is to prevent and terminate the crime being committed in your presence. And that would also take you to non-feasance and malfeasance. But yes, the immunity issue is very important, because if you know you can be sued for grabbing somebody or wrestling with somebody, then that's going to promote nonfeasance. The police officer is not going to do anything. They're just going to let it go on.
And Graham, the one of the issues is how do you determine outside the scope of their job? That's the hard part in qualified immunity. I mean, a lot of things are, you know, it's kind of easy to say this is within the scope, this is not within the scope. But how do you make that determination that qualified immunity does not apply because this police officer or this firefighter, whatever the particular job is, did not act like a reasonable police officer or a reasonable firefighter should do in that situation?
And who has the burden of proof on that issue? Sorry, who has the burden of proof, Professor, on that issue? The party seeking to avoid qualified immunity or the person asserting qualified immunity?
Excuse me.
That was Ron Weiss, attorney Ron Weiss from New York.
So my question is, when the question of qualified immunity is asserted, who has the burden of proof on that issue?
Oh, the person being sued, they raise this as a defense, so they're gonna have to say, I was acting within the scope of my duty.
I wanted to make that clear.
Hey, thank you so much, thank you.
You know, saying it and proving it, unfortunately, are not always the same thing.
Exactly, but it's raised as a defense. You can still initiate your lawsuit, and then the person raises, well, I'm immune from this lawsuit, and then they have to show that they were acting within the scope of their job.
Okay.
Thank you for your question.
I didn't want to call on you without you know, turn you into the student here.
That issue can be the benchmark on which an entire case is litigated. Years on that single issue where you're fighting over whether or not it applies or it didn't apply. And the challenge, and judges take a careful look at it, both sides cite right in their brief why they think it applies and why they think it shouldn't apply. But it's exhausted, in my opinion, on the litigation aspect as to whether or not, and there's a bounty of case law that addresses this particular issue, whether it applies or it doesn't apply in a given set of facts.
Okay, I want to move on, if I may, in the Breonna Taylor case. We saw that the issue of her death was not addressed by the Attorney General. And I know the Attorney General is a different position from that of the District Attorney. And that case was taken from the District Attorney because of stated conflicts of interest. But does a citizen have recourse if the District Attorney, as in this case, the Attorney General, did not even address the shooting death of Breonna? He addressed the rounds that were fired that went into the neighbor's apartment and the reckless, what we call reckless endangerment by the police officer. Is there any recourse that her family could have, being that the Attorney General did not even address her death with regard to that shooting, or even a DA failing to address the death of an individual that could have been a wrongful death? Do they go to an appellate court? Is there anything that the citizen can do?
This is what I was talking about earlier. First, I should say, I don't personally agree with the decision not to have advanced that case and bring that matter before the grand jury. So this is not I support or an agreement with that. But this goes back to what we talk about, the discretionary decisions. That unfortunately falls within the discretionary decision of the District Attorney in that particular case. What cases to bring before the grand jury and what charges to bring before the grand jury and what charges they shouldn't bring before the grand jury. And that falls under the umbrella of discretionary decision making. So to answer your question directly, the victim gets to sue the city for the wrong that was visited upon the family as a result of that. The law, as you well know, Graham, doesn't make you older or greater than you would have been. It makes you whole. So once a civil case is resolved, that injury or harm in many ways is settled or resolved. Now it becomes, what changes do you want to see advance in light of such a decision where the grand jury only got to hear certain charges and murder wasn't presented to them? That falls under the grounds of discretionary decision. And I don't believe there's anything they can do. But going back to what Kevin said earlier, you get to vote. And I think we all agree from the start that the district attorney is also held accountable to the people. The attorney general likewise is held accountable by the people. So one way of solving that issue is to make sure that that person is removed from that office by virtue of voting when the election rolls around.
Thank you. I forgot to unmute my microphone. We had a, I'm going to give you a scenario. I'm sorry, go ahead.
What Stephen said ties right back to what Casilda said at the beginning is, the district attorney's role is justice, but it's the people of the state of, New York or whatever against an individual. It's not Kevin versus an individual. So this it's the district attorney's discretion of what cases to take. And then if the district attorney doesn't feel I have enough to win at court, or I don't have or to go forward to court, that's the district attorney's decision. And unfortunately, the victim in this case and other cases can't individually take a case to a criminal court, but they could certainly go to a civil court.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Let me give you a scenario. You have an individual who is a predicate felon, and he's arrested for a weapons charge. And the officers who arrested him phoned in a 911 call of a man with a gun. And they themselves responded to their own phone call. But in the process, they frisked maybe 15 or 20 people at that location because allegedly the 911 caller said there was a guy with a gun wearing a denim jacket, jeans, and sneakers. He's a male black. And subsequent to that, they do come across a man with a gun, and that man is arrested and charged with weapons possessions. Illegal, unethical, or just smart thinking?
So I'll have to ask you, I like this scenario, but did they really observe someone with a gun, or are they believed to have a gun, or they just created the narrative?
They created the narrative.
Oh no,
they knew.
That's an easy one, Ryan. No, that's an easy one. That's an easy one. And I say that easy in the context of, I frankly believe those are police officers that must be removed from the service. That's how it's. You have great police officers, really remarkable, wonderful police officers who do remarkable work every day, leave their home every day, not knowing whether they make it home alive. That effort and that heroic effort is constantly undermined by, and I want to say the few bad ones within the ranks. So if you talk about police reform to me involves holding police officers accountable for when they see an act, as you indicated before, when you see a crime being committed and you don't affirmatively report it and act, you should be held accountable, criminally accountable for failure to act, and not on a misdemeanor level. I think on a felony level. More must be done to weed out the bad ones within the ranks. If you have, Kevin's in the military and he knows there's a significant effort spent in the military to weed out bad apples within the ranks. You cannot condone bad act. So when I say it's easy, it's very easy, but it's easy in a very assertive way. If you're a police officer making up allegations in order to just justify something, one way it's usually done too is just drive up real fast on people and see who runs, and then chase after the person who runs. You can't police in that fashion. You're going to create a certain degree of discredit, and you're going to end up arresting the wrong people. So no, you can't create the crime and create the probable cause to then advance the probable cause. It must be that you saw someone that you believe to have a gun, or you didn't. And if you're creating the element and then pursuing people, because then you have the Fourth Amendment, unreasonable search and seizure. It's unreasonable to search and seize someone based upon allegations that you fictitiously create. So long answer to the question, but it's easy. Those officers simply should be removed. You don't want those police officers on the job.
Graham, I'm not
Yes.
taking a position on what should happen to the police officers, but I will take the position in terms of the process. And when we look again at the process, when they do all of the scenarios that you explained, has to go to the DA and the ECAB, where they have to make a decision if what the officers are saying actually rises to the level to be able to get an indictment or to attach it to a charge. So the process of making sure that the DA does and review, because it's a lengthy process in ECAB when an individual is arrested. They go through, and that's why sometimes individuals are arrested and they sit in jail for, waiting to see the judge for 24 to 48 hours, because ECAB is the 88 ECAB,
Early Case Assessment Bureau.
Thank you, early case, right. And at that point, they make that assessment. And in terms of speaking to the officers, who they probably have worked with for many years, they will have a sense as to what's going on. And that's where, again, we, the people, make sure that the DA and everyone else thereafter sees that, no, maybe this doesn't seem right. And even if it gets to the point where it has to go in front of a judge, for a judge to make the determination and look at the big picture, because all the pieces of the puzzles have to match.
That was an awesome answer about the pieces of the puzzles have to match, because it's more than, and Graham, when you threw that out, I thought that was maybe something I saw in Blue Bloods once. But, the police getting that, and Stephen mentioned the Fourth Amendment issues. You can't create your own probable cause. So whatever gun they found, never going to come into a courtroom. So the prosecutor has to, the prosecutor will know that. So the police have to understand, if I'm getting all this evidence that's never going to see a courtroom, I shouldn't be doing these things. So as far as the pieces of the puzzle, the prosecutors have a responsibility to make sure the police are getting good evidence that can be used at court. Because if the police are getting evidence that's just going to sit in an evidence room and then never see the light of a courtroom, it's not worth what the police just did. All right. So it's all the pieces of the puzzle. So in your scenario, yes, definitely unethical, definitely illegal, and that gun is never going to come into a courtroom.
Okay, the reason why I brought that up, because that's a true story. There were two officers doing that up in Harlem back in the 70s. And that's how they were getting gun cases, until somebody realized, they went back and checked the Sprint report, and they looked to see where the phone call was coming from. And I think they did some voice analysis on these calls and realized it was the same voice. And it was the voice of one of the two police officers. But that was how they were getting their gun collars. In Harlem, they figured it was they would do it on Friday nights. And they figured back then, a lot of people were carrying guns, so they were making the calls. So I had asked some judges, when a person comes before you and you don't have the full flesh of what happened, sometimes the injustices can come out against the defendant in a case, especially if they're a predicate felon, and then their sentencing is even worse than what it should have been. But these two officers were finally caught, and they were dealt with by the district attorney.
Hey, Graham, can I ask you a question as a police officer? Because in your scenario, assuming there's a partner, what is the partner's responsibility to turn in his partner when something like that happens? And what's that other officer? And how often does that happen, or partners have this relationship that they're going to kind of watch each other's back?
The watching of the back is for me, it was in terms of our own safety. It was not in terms of integrity. If you cross the line, I turn you in. And I have prosecuted police officers during my tenure, and even a PBA delegate for brutalizing a prisoner. So, and I picked my partners. I didn't work with just anybody. I was particular about who I work with. And there were guys who were known to, as we call it, ice picking, falsely arresting people. And there were two officers in one of the units that I worked in that were prosecuted and sent to prison for 5 years, each of them. One male, one female. So, but that was years ago, and that integrity is the issue now. because we don't have that level of integrity that we had then. I don't want to take the time to expansively go into it, but there was a check and balance system at that time that does not exist today within the New York City Police Department. So, but the officer's job is to turn in anybody that they knowingly has violated the law or is in violation of the patrol guide, especially when it comes to an engagement with a civilian. They're required to.
And I saw Bernice had a question to chat about, what about off-duty officers? Are they required to respond if they see a crime?
We are under the law, a police officer is on duty 24 hours a day. If a crime is committed in our presence, we are to take action to stop the crime. There are jurisdictions, New York City police officers have jurisdiction in the entire state of New York. Police officers from outside the state, outside the city do not, but they can take action and summon the police. But you are required by law to engage and to prevent any crime that's being occurred. Yes, and to fail to do that is nonfeasance.
You also have one great question from someone who asks if she can raise the issue of her son.
That's his son. Yeah,
his-
Fred Nurse. Fred, you want to chime in, please, real quick?
Okay, I'm trying to.
You're there.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. And good afternoon, everyone. Here's the situation. My son, and this takes place in Delaware. My son was asked by a friend of his to introduce his friend to my son's seller for marijuana sale. During the course of the sale, the alleged buyer brandished a weapon and shot the seller. My son did not know the buyer prior to this time, and the seller was shot 3 times, and my son was given 3 life sentences, three lifelong sentences in jail. Meanwhile, his friend, who was the introducing party for the buyer, was the state. How's the term go?
He was the witness.
Yes, it became the state witness, and he was badgered during the course of the interview or the interrogation process and threatened if he did not cooperate. So I'm appealing to find out what it is that I might be able to do as a parent to assist my son. Certainly, I would like for him to come out of jail.
All right, so your son brought the seller to the transaction.
Yeah. What the seller to the transaction?
Your son's friend brought the buyer.
Yes.
And your son did not know the buyer.
Right.
And the buyer summarily shot the seller. And
Yes.
Your son was convicted for the shooting.
Yes. Along with the actual, of course, the shooter.
Oh, the shooter was apprehended. Okay.
Yes.
So we're discussing the collaboration with regard to witnesses and offers that are made to witnesses in lieu of prosecution. Was he offered a deal not to be prosecuted or anything like that?
Yeah.
Okay. But he was the one that brought the shooter. So they gave a deal to the guy that brought the shooter.
Correct.
And your son was sentenced. Okay.
Yes.
Graham, quickly before you
What was your son specifically charged with in Delaware?
He was charged with possession of a weapon that was never found, and in Delaware, you get the same charge or sentencing as the person that you allegedly collaborated with for the crime.
Can we, this is going to be, I'm sure, lengthy. Fred, can I get you in touch with them after the forum?
Yes, please.
One of them, all right, to discuss this, because that's going to take, we only have about a half hour left. And there are some
Thank you so much for taking this, matter up to on the agenda. Thank you so
Right.
kindly.
And Fred, just also let us know if your son has an appellate attorney, because I'm sure you're at the, the first level of appeal. So just,
Yes.
let us know
Yes.
that as well.
It was denied on the appeal.
Okay.
All right. Speaking, my next aspect really is wrongful.
Graham?
Yes.
Yeah, quickly, there was actually a question on the chat from Midori Kenny. I don't think that question was addressed. It says, I hear that the boyfriend of Breonna Taylor had a gun that was fired in the shooting. Was that addressed as well? And what was the result of that address?
As I recall, yes, he did fire some shots, and he's a licensed gun owner. And he stated that he believed there was a burglary in process, somebody was forcibly entering, and that these officers did not identify themselves. So he discharged, I believe, 2 or 3 rounds. I believe a sergeant was struck in the leg. And I don't think that the charges are going to be, I think the charges were dropped against him at that time or subsequent to the shooting.
Yeah, and
But
this
he was
case kind of,
arrested.
this case kind of shows the danger of a no-knock warrant, because when somebody's coming in your house, you don't know who's coming in your house. So you have to balance, also people's right to defend their house and themselves, and you don't know who's actually coming in your house.
Right.
That's a very good.
I've executed no-knock warrants, and I've always knocked on the door. I didn't break in the door. I knocked on the door and never had a problem. What was that? Did the friend get prosecuted, especially in the middle of the night?
You mean the same question, or
I
is
was
it?
looking at the question.
No. This question that you're reading
That's
has to
regarding
do with
Fred.
exactly.
Right.
What the other one was that addressed as well, and what was the result of the address?
I believe that's the fellow that was working with the state as a witness. The guy that brought the killer was not prosecuted, correct, Fred?
He was given a light sentence.
The shooter or the guy that brought the shooter?
The guy who brought the shooter.
Oh, okay.
Not a light sentence.
Oh, light sentence.
So he was also involved with 3 other shootings in which he was a witness of.
Okay. All right. I want to jump. Sandrine, could you do the shared screen? I want to do a shared screen quickly. So Sandrine, if you could share the screen so we can see it. Oh, okay. All right. Before you, in Kings County, there is a unit called the Conviction Review Unit. And it was started by the late Ken Thompson, who was the district attorney in Brooklyn, an old friend of mine, God rest his soul. But they went back and started to review cases of wrongful prosecutions. And I wish we could enlarge this, but if you go to the Brooklyn DA's office Conviction Review Unit, you will see these 29 photos. And I wanted you to see the pictures, the faces, as opposed to the numbers. These are 29 men and women, 1 woman, 1 male Black, who was only sentenced to community service. All of the other men did state time, and some of these men died in prison after being wrongfully convicted. And it is striking to see the years in which these men served, some of them 21 up to 32.5 years. The combined total is 230 years of life taken from this group of people. 230 years taken, and this is only cases that were uncovered in the last 6 years in Kings County. Men and women who did not commit the crimes that they were convicted of through the criminal justice system. It's horrific, and it shows us how critical the area of law and justice is, because when it goes from justice to injustice, it truly affects not only these individuals, but it affects their families, their mothers, their fathers, their children. The fifth guy there, Daryl Austin, he did 13 years and he died in prison. Go down to 2015, Willie Stuckey Jr. He did 15 years and he died in prison. The lives of people, the lives of people are most important. And Dwight D. Eisenhower said that the system of democracy must place the people ahead of the law. The safety of the people has to be considered before the law. But I just wanted to bring this picture up so you could see the faces of 29 people in one county reviewed in a period of 6 years who were wrongfully convicted. And some of these individuals were sent to prison by the same detective. The same detective. All right, you can bring it down. Thank you, Mohammed.
I have a question.
Yes.
What was the
But don't do it while you can listen.
Excuse us. Mute,
What?
Angela, mute your phone, please. Mute your microphone.
What was the consequence of that harm that caused by the same detective? What is he doing now? Is he still in the force, or is he's been put into trial or whatever? Anyone?
No, he's retired. He's retired.
Pension?
He has his pension. He did a number of convictions in Kings County while Charles Hines was the DA. And he swears that every case that he handled was done properly and within the rule of law. Pretty much as the Central Park Five. I know one of the officers involved in that case, and he swears everything was done fair and above board, but we know that's not true. But that detective, Gardella is his name, there are numerous cases that DA Thompson was looking into prior to his death with regard to the interactions between he and Charles Hines and those in the DA's office. So it's critical. We know, and one thing I want to address, the withholding of evidence, and coming back to our attorneys, in the grand jury, the district attorney can withhold evidence and information from the grand jury that could tend to lean towards the innocence of the accused. Or at times we've seen that the evidence was even withheld in trial and was not summarily produced until an appeal. How can we rectify this is there a way of rectifying this in the grand jury scenario? We know they don't want to put out their whole case, but when they have evidence or information that tends to exonerate the defendant, why is it not presented?
Graham, you brought a great point up because there was a study that recently just came out about wrongful convictions. And the one issue that caused the most wrongful convictions was prosecutors not turning over what's known as Brady evidence. That's evidence that would exonerate the accused. That, when they broke down all the wrongful convictions, that issue of the prosecutor not turning evidence over was the #1 reason for wrongful convictions. So New York has changed their discovery laws, where you have to now give your discovery sooner to the defense than in the past. Usually discovery would come later in the process. So that is, one small step. But you're right, it is a balance of how much of your case do you want to show versus, and this all goes back to justice. What is the right thing to do? And that's why I'm so glad you showed those pictures, because we have to stop thinking these as numbers and things. Right. Every Friday morning when I used to see my boss in Korea, he's from General Morgan from Freeport, Stephen. I'd go in with the stack of all the cases. He said, those are not a stack of files. They are a stack of lives. Then I had another boss he said, you want to be a prosecutor? Read the book, The Innocent Man. When you're done with that book, come back. I'll make you a prosecutor, but don't let this happen in my office. So it goes back to justice. It has to be the prosecutor has to say, my goal is justice, not to just put somebody in jail or not to win a case. My goal is justice, and justice is so both sides have all the information. So it goes back to the morals of the prosecutor, and also, you know, you have to remember the prosecutors do have to follow the rules. And if they don't, you know, they could be suspended from the practice of law or lose their license.
Mhm.
I think this is the part where I need to say, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And we know that's Dr. King's quote. But when we think of the system is made up of police, prosecutor, defense attorneys, and judges. And we all work together for the same people, the people of the state, New York, or whichever state. And we may be on different sides of the bench, but our goal is and should be justice for the people, whether it's to result in a conviction or an acquittal. So when the DA is in the grand jury making those necessary decisions, they have to always remember that it's really we the people, and they're working for the people. And it doesn't become an individual issue for them, because it's imperative to make sure that the Constitution again is upheld. And that's again what we all take and we all do as oath as officers of the court.
I'll just add this. When Ken Thompson, as you said, may he rest in peace, when he became the district attorney of Brooklyn, there's a different sense came over, in my humble opinion, the way cases were viewed. So the first point I want to make as to that is the power of the people when we vote and when we serve on jury. Because those faces that you display, Graham, were as a result of the people selecting a district attorney who set a tenure to create an office where you review convictions. And those people were exonerated as a result of the people electing a district attorney who saw that as a priority. So one message I'd like to convey here is don't overlook or underestimate the value of your vote and the value of your commitment to serve on a jury, because it sometimes makes a hell of a lot of difference. And this is prime proof that it has. So that's the first thing. The next point, as to the Brady, as Kevin brought up, you get in trouble to, as lawyers are scrutinized in more ways than the public may know. If you knowingly withhold Brady material, it's a reportable offense. So you don't just get away with it. And I've known of folks who have lost law license because they withheld Brady material. So the scrutiny is there, and there are built-in safeguards to make sure that Brady material are disclosed. But the leadership of any office, district attorney or any office, governs how the staff and the working members of that office, whether it's a military, whether it's a corporation or anything of that nature, a leadership sets the tenure. And if you have a district attorney who's made it clear, as Kevin pointed out, that a general says, look, those are not stacks of people, not stacks of files, those are stacks of people's lives. If you have a leader who sets that tenure, then that carries itself through the line assistants who present cases to the grand jury, or whoever may present it. And that's how you safeguard it, because ultimately people play a role in everything. So you could have all the rules that are designed, but the people who we elect and the people who we put in charge play a great role in that, and being responsible in that obligation to make sure that you pursue justice, not just convictions, justice. And if you're guided by that, and if you have an office that sets that tenure, that can carry the day.
As a resident of Kings County, I can attest to the power of the wrongful convictions in ousting the district attorney. I mean, that was a major part of that election. So, does that system of election always work? Perhaps not, but at least in this one instance in Kings County, it did.
Right. That's one area where you saw a marked difference from one. And I'm not suggesting that anyone did anything wrong. I don't know enough to give an opinion of that. But I do know that there was a different sense of purpose once Ken became the district attorney. And finally, going back to the wrongful conviction, I want to emphasize how important, as I said earlier, whenever you have a police officer creating probable cause, why you can't have such people in any office. You don't want a firefighter creating the fire to go stop the fire. You don't want a doctor creating the injury so he or she could perform. You don't want a lawyer outside creating a crime to go show that he's a great criminal defense attorney. You don't want anyone creating the scenario unless you're a cook. You don't want anyone creating anything other than say, I'm a cook, I created this great meal. Outside of that, you need people who realizes that their job is to protect and to serve in the police department. If you're creating your probable cause, that's just a bad thing. And I will stand by that position. When you convict the wrong person and when you arrest the wrong person, it's important to realize that a number of things happen. You give the victim a false sense of justice, and that's a disservice to the victim by itself. You also destroy the life of the person who's wrongfully convicted. And as I've often told jurors, when you arrest a man, you just don't arrest him or her. And I meant man as in man and woman. You arrest the whole family. You arrest his plans of what he wanted to do tomorrow. So that responsibility becomes very important, that you make sure that you're arresting the right person. And the other point is the true criminal gets to walk when you arrest the wrong person. And there's no study that shows how many of the crimes that true criminal or the person who should have been arrested went on to commit as a result of the wrong person. Because when you convict the wrong person, it closes the file.
Right.
And the true criminal now continues to act in an exonerated fashion and go on to commit more crimes. So that's why it's critically important to investigate thoroughly, get the right person, as opposed to getting the wrong person.
Yeah, it's very true. In the Central Park 5 case, we know that although 5 individuals were arrested, the rapist went on to commit another rape and a homicide before it was revealed. And ironically, he and one of the members of the Central Park 5 were housed in the same correctional facility. And he saw the guy and said, hey, what are you so down about? Oh, I'm here serving time for a crime I didn't commit. And they engaged in a conversation, and he told the guy, listen, man, hold your head up. Everything's going to be all right. And I think his name was Ruiz. He then went from the day room and called his attorney. And he said, I've done a lot of evil in my life. He said, but I've become a Christian now, and I have to confess everything that I've done. And he said, there's a man here serving time for a crime that I committed. And that's how the case was broken. So we had 5 men serving time for a crime they didn't commit, wrongfully accused. But because of a conversation that 2 inmates had, it led to the freedom of 5 other men. The last guy that was in that page where I had the 29 people, he was convicted on the word of an individual who had a mental history and had been housed at the G building in Kings County. And in that case, the assistant DA admitted that he knew of the medical history of the man. So that became a problem, which also led to his exoneration. Kissinger, could you mute out, please?
Graham, there is a question on the chat. Someone asks if we can explain this in relation to Amadou Diallo. Remember that?
Was next, yes.
You can address that question?
Yes. Casilda Roper is here. Kadiatou is here. I'm here. And there is a netting here. On October 31st, 1987, in the 75th precinct in Brooklyn, a young man, Patrick Bailey, was shot and killed by a police officer named Kenneth Boss. He was shot in the back, and another young lady was also shot. Casilda Roper was representing the family. And we reviewed the paperwork, and it was evident to me that the story didn't add up, but that her client was shot in the back and he bled to death. The DA at that time, Charles Hines, instructed his people, and I know this to be a fact, instructed his people to put the case on a back burner. the shooting, when a police officer discharges his weapon and kills somebody, there has to be a hearing. Charles Hines took it upon himself not to handle that matter. 15 months later, the officer was working in the street crime unit. He's in Manhattan in the Bronx on Wheeler Avenue. And he, along with 3 other officers, shot and killed Amadou Diallo under what they said was, they thought he was a wanted rapist, which was a lie. I had a meeting with Mayor Giuliani and the police commissioner and the deputy commissioner regarding the shooting. I revealed to Mayor Giuliani that the officer was sent from the 75th to the street crime unit when he had an open shooting incident in Brooklyn, which Charles Hines never addressed. Giuliani almost fell out of his chair. But what happened to the original case? The district attorney, Charles Hines, chose not to present that case to the grand jury in Brooklyn at all. He said he reviewed it and it did not warrant a grand jury hearing. So the case that was open was quickly wiped away so that it would not be a subsequent added issue in the shooting of Amadou Diallo. And this is how critical the office of the district attorney is. As Stephen said, you're not affecting one person, you're affecting the lives of many people. So Patrick Bailey's family never got justice. And subsequently, because of that failure, Kadiatou Diallo is sitting here without true justice because her son is gone. Sean Bell is gone, and so many others are gone. And unfortunately, it's not just people who have been incarcerated, but people whose lives have been taken from us.
Now, I have a follow-up comment. I met Patrick Bailey's mother when I arrived at the first time in America when Amadou was killed. And the following, after that, years and years, I've met many families that have been impacted by police shooting of their sons and daughters. One of the things families are advocating for now is to take the cases of police shooting from the district attorney's offices and have an independent special prosecutor that will be appointed to address those cases because they don't trust the district attorney's offices anymore. So I'm asking the panelists, what do you think about that? Because some of the families are successful, including some of the grassroots groups that I joined to have those laws passed.
I like to say that in terms of what Attorney Stephen Drummond said, I agree with wholeheartedly. It's about voting. And people are hurting and members of the community feel wrong and they lose faith in the system. And because of all the stories and images and of overturned convictions and police brutality, it becomes a part where the system really kind of have to fix itself. But we all are part of the system. We all in society are part of that dynamic. And it requires us to vote and it requires the community to put pressures on the legislation and make it happen. Because until that occurs, the likelihood of things not changing, when Ken Thompson came in, he made those changes as was required. And the rights for people within the system and the various ways to improve that system when it loses sight of the overall purpose is to fix it by educating the community and making sure we have people in there to address the issues that we are facing. And with police brutality, and I've handled quite a few of those cases over my career, being one of them. And as Graham said, with Miss Bailey and her family, the whole family was completely devastated. And there was nothing really you can do. And that's Miss Diallo and all Miss Bell and all the others. So it's an impact not only on the family, but just us as people who reside in this country, this community, this county.
Thank you. Gentlemen? Well, I will say that Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, Graham, there's another question from Bernice Green. For those wrongfully convicted, did the DA look to see any pattern in the arresting officer's record? Also, is there an estimate of wrongfully convicted individuals across the country? If not, why not?
That's a good question. Some of that information died with Ken. I know the Mr. Gonzalez, the present DA, has continued the work that Ken started with that unit. And I know some of the detectives that work there. I've worked with them when I was working, and their integrity is unquestionable. They're truly dedicated to reviewing these cases. There was one thing with regard to Kings County, there were numerous documents that were destroyed. That is a fact. I got that directly from Ken. And there were cases that we had discussed. He said, I'd like to do something on this one too, but we don't have the paperwork. And what the family has is limited in terms of what the police had. There are a lot of games that were being played. In terms of the nation and wrongfully convicted people, there are tens of thousands. And it's a shame because a lot of times people will look at numbers. Police officers will look at numbers and meeting a quota, one thing or the other, paying a mortgage. And that's not the way this is to be met. And once again, integrity has to be brought back into the mix. And I'm speaking with regard to the police officers. We must vote. As Casilda said, voting is everything. When you vote for a mayor, you're also getting a police commissioner, you're getting the head of your education department, all of these things. And we see coming up next month what voting will do. So when we vote, we hire somebody or we fire somebody. And what is really distressing in the work that we have been doing is that you see the wrongs and a lot of times you don't see the rights. The needed corrections are slow to come, which is why with the Amadou Diallo Foundation, we're trying to raise funds to put kids through school, to enter various professions. And whatever profession they go into, they should realize that they must be an activist in whatever area of life they're in order for things to get better. And it's not that we can sit back and wait for somebody to do it. We are the somebody that can do it.
Graham, if I may.
Good to see you, Sandrine. You look good.
Back on Midori's next question. Like, I hear you guys talking about we need to vote, we can change things, and educate ourselves, right? So when we educate ourselves and we are told about all of these issues, a lot of us are aware, but they don't stop, they keep on happening. So I'm gonna add to that question in maybe bringing, does race have something to do with this? Because when I look at the list of the wrongfully convicted, they all look the same to me. You may have one or two anomaly, but does really race has an important role to play in this justice system?
I believe so. I'm not a panelist. Let me step back. Let me step back. But
I'll go first. I'll say yes. All right. I'm going to come around and say yes. It does play a role in this. Certainly, the statistics bear this out. I mean, from a number of issues. If you look at the stop and frisk statistics, right? Who is being stop and frisked? All of these issues. Yes, race is a big factor. And I see some other things in the chat. And I had a speaker in my class one time, and he said to me, it's not the system, it's the people running the system is the problem. And I see the word integrity comes up a lot in the chat. We could tear down the system, put another system in place, but if it's the same people running the system, is there going to be change? So we need, it's not just a change of this law or that law. We need a change in how we view what we want in our country. All right. We want every person to be born with an equal opportunity for schooling, for education, for jobs, for everything. And once we have those changes, then we would have the right people in the job.
So,
go ahead, Stephen.
So first, going back to Mrs. Diallo's earlier question about removing the police officer cases from district attorney into a special prosecution. The first thing I want to acknowledge, and including Ms. Bell and Ms. Diallo and the many other families who have gone through this shared tragedy, I want to commend them for the effort that they've taken on to take personal pain and help advance causes to help. We are all here as a result of someone's personal pain. So I think it's important to acknowledge that. Having said that, I echo what Kevin said regarding it's the statistics plays it out. Race plays a significant role in many of these cases, and you just have to just look at the numbers to see how it bears out, and it's there. There's enough evidence to support it. But I would caution removing it from the DA's office to anywhere else, because you would have to ask what kind of system then are you creating and who are you sending the cases to. It's not just systematically all DA's office won't prosecute certain kind of cases. So you might have a district attorney's office that's willing to prosecute any kind of cases, take it out of that person's hands and give it to a body that might not be as inclined. The end result is for you to get justice. So the caution must be, do we systematically remove it from the district attorney, or do we get a case-by-case assessment to appoint special prosecutor? And I think a special prosecution approach may be something should be considered as opposed to a systematic removal of all these cases. Because if you have a Brooklyn DA's office under Ken Thompson, then all cases are going to be looked at in a very significant, meaningful way, as you see with a evidence review and a conviction review unit. So is that the kind of office that you would want to handle all kind of cases, or would you want to remove that from an office like that? I think it should be deliberated upon before creating a nationwide systematic removal of cases from district attorney's office.
Okay, we're almost out of time. I want to give a shout out to Bernice Green. I know she's out there somewhere. She's the co-editor of Our Time Press, and we want to thank them for their advertising this in their paper online in Brooklyn. So thank you, Bernice. I want to thank our panelists, the less than ordinary Stephen Drummond, attorney Kevin Boyle, and Casilda Roper-Simpson. I almost said Thompson. I'm getting a little mixed up here. We want to thank you all for your presence. If there are no more, what is this? Is question?
You have 50 questions.
I'm looking here. Yes. To Angelica's point, when, where, and how does the education of the people begin? Do we bring civics back into the classroom? Well,
it begins within our own homes.
And
when it begins in our own homes, then we take it out to the rest of our community, our neighbor, the neighbor next to us, the left, right, across the street. It begins in our own home, because that's where the education starts. And I, as a parent of 3, have been educating my children since they were born. So it really depends on us as individuals to educate, because from the perspective of the system can and does not work unless each part of the system seek justice and execute their functions fairly and adequately, according to the law and the Constitution. So if we educate ourselves, we will make sure that it continues to happen. And when it doesn't happen, make noise.
Mm.
Wow, thank you, Casilda. That is a powerful point. I think I want to add to that, all the children deserve to know all the cases that have happened, people who have been killed wrongly, who have been victimized wrongly. They have to be educated on those cases, because history got to be documented. Many thousands and thousands of parents today have lost their children unjustly. So thank you again for your input into this forum. I know that we are out of time, but this is excellent. And I'm going to give back to Graham so he can wrap it up.
Okay. Again, I would like to say thank you. I will repeat my chairperson. Thank you for being here with us, panelists, as well as viewers and those who presented questions. We have to continue to talk, to critique, and to analyze in order to improve anything. And we are the solution to our problems. And we have to greet every problem that we have at a higher level than when you came upon it. And we're going to continue to push for the education of our children and higher education, and making sure that all people are treated fairly and equitably. I want you to stay safe. Remember to wear your mask, wash your hands, because when we come back the next time, we want you to be here to spend some time with us. God bless you, God keep you, and may heaven shine upon you. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Pleasure joining.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
All right, bye-bye. Thank you.
Mr. Weatherspoon?
Oh, yes, Midori?
Yes, me and my friend, I don't know if he's still here. No, he left. We're working on a project for Amadou Diallo about Black Lives Matter in my school. And I was wondering if you had anything to say that I could put in my project. I don't know. It was just really helpful to be here. Thank you guys just so much for having me here. It was really helpful. I was just wondering if you had anything else like to say, I guess.
Well, I could speak for hours, so why don't you put your phone number or your email in the chat box. Send me your number and I'll get in touch with you and we can talk later. All right, what school do you go to, Midori?
I go to East West School of International Studies. It's a school in Flushing, Queens, New York.
Oh, Flushing, okay.
Yeah.
My son,
so much for
all right, don't go anywhere yet. I'm copying your email. Make sure I have it. Okay, I got it. Very good. So we'll be in touch. All right. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
Thank you.
Sandrine, you look good, good, good. Glad to see you made it.